Justice R.I.P. combines aspects of Japanese traditional music with Western harmony. The piece begins with a Phrygian vamp, where we have green, red, green, red. So going from tonic to dominant is just alternating stability and unrest. The instrument that plays at the beginning is a gagaku instrument that is meant to set the tone, the mood for a piece of Japanese court music. The progression here is a 1 flat 2. Which is borrowed from Phrygian mode. Now, an interesting thing that's going on here is we kind of have this going on. This set of 3 notes, the F, the A, and the B together create a Lydian dominant trichord. You could say that there's the standard dominant trichord, the F, G, B, which resolves like this. But there's also F, A, B, which resolves like this. Or in this case, it resolves in a sort of Phrygian manner to E major, or in this case, E minor. But in Japanese traditional music, it is reminiscent of the In scale. And also of the Koto scale, Kumoi Joshi. The A section is highly functional and has traditional Aeolian sounding harmony that's popular in Japan. The instrument used in this section is the koto, which is the national instrument of Japan and is often paired with a flute like a shakuhachi or with a shamisen or multiple shamisen. The progression at the beginning here is a flat 6 flat 7 1 inverted. It's a 1 flat 7 flat 6. And if we look at the first line of the A section, we have flat 7, we have flat 6, we have flat 3. Now if you combine all of those together, you get the minor secondary chords in their entirety. And as I have said before, when you have all 3 of the minor secondary chords, it ends up sounding rather sweet, which when we hear that major 3 chord, it sounds rather sweet in context. And then it becomes a minor 5. Now it is worth noting there are multiple regressions going on here. Minor 5 usually does not proceed to 4, which happens twice in this example. And these regressions coincide with these 2-bar phrases. When we have this bass line da da da, whenever that happens, that's usually where the regressions are. Na 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 ba ba ba, na na na, and then it goes down to the 4. I mean, we hear that the bass line makes sense. If we get rid of the first chord here, then the regressions go away. So these chords before are supporting the harmony by adding movement to these more structural chords. In the first instance, the 5 does not proceed to 4. Instead, it proceeds to flat 6, which is permissible because of the deceptive cadence. In the second instance, the 5 is taken out, and all we have is the single tonicization of 4, which is permissible because it's a secondary dominant. Except in this case, it's a half diminished secondary dominant. During the first ending, there's a resolution deceptively to flat 6, which then goes to 4 and then back to 1, which is at the beginning of the form. So we have that section, which happens right after and then we get flat 6 in the bass. The second ending is much more elaborate. Instead of resolving back to 1, and instead of doing a deceptive cadence and moving to flat 6, he moves to 6 half diminished 7, which I marked as tonic function. I don't really have a good explanation of why it's tonic function, other than the fact that the minor 6 chord is typically tonic function, and this is how I think it's functioning in this context. Perhaps the flat 3 in this context, the G natural here, is really a G sharp, but because of the key, he has to make it a G natural in order to fit the modal palette that he's created. That's much more complicated than just a little deceptive cadence. So this 6 half diminished 7 is a product of Dorian mode. It's pretty exclusive to Dorian mode. And it's used as another tonic function chord in this context because remember, the first time we went to flat 6, which is a deceptive resolution, to a predominant chord. And in this case, we go to 6 half diminished 7, which is another movement that we didn't expect. You could call it deceptive, but it is 6, which is typically a tonic function scale degree, natural 6, rather than flat 6, which is usually a predominant scale degree. We also have another instance of minor 1, flat 3. I don't know what the significance of this is. Maybe it's just a sweet sounding progression moving from 1 to flat 3, but I thought I'd bring it up. It actually ends up being it is a full flat 3 chord. It's just got some crazy melodic stuff happening on top of it. It can sometimes be convoluted to analyze music when the melody is so removed from the harmony. But in this case, there is a little bit of a divorce from what the melody is doing to what the chords are doing. And there's even scholars who are currently in the field now that pioneered this thinking about divorcing the chords from the melody. That's somewhat true, but I think it's really contextual. And in this case, it's clear to me that there's a full G major chord going on here. Moving on, we have a sort of interesting real sequence going on here. In this case, he's using the most functional part of the sequence, which is... But it could just keep going on. I'm kind of mixing the two together, the major and the minor one together. These two real sequences do have tonal precedent. As we can see, they lie within chords that are within a key if you include modal mixture. Granted, not all of the chords fall within the key, but a lot of them do, as we can see. The B section is the most typical of Japanese popular music, not so much their traditional style, although there is a little bit of influence that I may say comes melodically from a more traditional style. As I had mentioned, the koto is often paired with a shakuhachi or shamisen. In this case, melodically, it's a koto, and we're in a sort of yo mode. Which is very typical of vocal music in Japan. Not so much shakuhachi music, which is usually more in in mode. The progression starting here sounds like this. We get that same tonicization from before. And finally, our first strong cadence in quite a while. The opening is like a Royal Road progression. But instead of going to minor 1, it goes to 5 of 4, which is a very common substitution. And that 5 of 4 is then going to go to 4, which then goes to 5, 1. The next thing of note is the, which is the best part of the piece. I say that objectively, I'm kidding. The reason why this is such a wonderful thing is because it's a 2-5-1 of flat 6, which is one of the most stereotypically Japanese sounding progressions. And it's just used in such a celebratory way here. This added 6 that's kind of being created with the melody, more like divorcing from the chords. Even like you look at the first chord of the B section, YA, it should be G. If it wants to be part of the chord, it should be a G natural, but it's not, it's an A. Which kind of creates a 4 chord, but I don't think it's functioning as a 4 chord. I think the melody just hit a 4. And I think that is because the melody is being constrained by yo mode. Rei Kondoh is being extremely specific with using yo mode, and he doesn't want to break out of yo mode. And as a result, when he does this Royal Road progression, it sounds a little odd next to these notes that aren't fitting into it perfectly well, but it does have a sort of charm. We do get that same half diminished 7 tonicization. The tonicization of minor 4. Now this section right after we hit the tonic function cadence, we get that in mode from the beginning of the piece, or the kumoi joshi koto scale. But why I think it's really notable is that the shakuhachi is playing it, which makes sense. Because the shakuhachi's primary mode is in mode. We also get a reprise, because it's in mode, of this Phrygian progression. This Phrygian 1 flat 2 progression, of course, bringing attention to this Lydian dominant trichord. The final section and we get some very prominent in mode going on here. Over a chromatic lament. And it's the type of chromatic lament that is just a minor chord with a chromatically descending bass. And then flat 6, 5. And then that is our cadence, which then brings us back up to the... So that's it for Justice R.I.P. It's a little piece of music. It's not super complicated, but it has a lot of interesting mixes of Western harmony and Japanese traditional music, which I guess you could call Holgaku, because this is sort of a more modern style of traditional music, which is weird to say, but I'm saying Eastern style Japanese music of like the 19th century, of the early 20th century, before a lot of German tradition and Riemann got superimposed into Japanese culture. There was a lot of this shakuhachi, koto, shamisen music that was the foundation of their leisure music. The sho is a more stately, more wealthy instrument that was mainly used in the Japanese courts. I hope this was interesting. I have a Ko-Fi. I have all of my charts and diagrams up there that you can buy, and you can tip me. And thank you so much for watching. Good evening, and see you in 2 weeks.